Theirs was a textbook romance between a young co-ed with a promising future
She had her whole life ahead of her.
and a dashing young man who swore to love her till death do they part.
They seem very happy living with one another and honeymooning and things of that nature. No problems, no issues, no nothing.
But less than a year after their sacred vows, an inexplicable crime shattered their lives.
She had been stabbed. It was a bloodbath.
Why? Why her? Why anybody? But definitely why her?
To unmask a killer, police would have to navigate a twisted path of sexual obsession, betrayal, and lies.
It was passionate, it was hot, and it was dangerous.
You just couldn't make this up if you tried.
You have a killer who is enraged, maybe even deranged or psychotic.
Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, 7:30 a.m. It's a cold winter morning in Raleigh, North Carolina. But as the sun rises over the city, morning commuters spot something alongside Interstate 540 that takes their breath away.
Several drivers headed west on I-540 noticed what appeared to be a body off the side of the road.
As 911 calls pour into dispatch, first responders race to the scene.
16197.
There, they find a young woman lying in the grass. But sadly, it's much too late. She's dead.
The first thought that authorities probably had was that she was perhaps a pedestrian. Maybe she got hit by accident on the side of the road.
But when police take a closer look at the woman's body, they quickly realize this is no ordinary accident.
No, she's not been hit. She's been stabbed.
All right, I'll get major crimes.
They can see that she has been stabbed repeatedly about her face and throat. It's apparent that she has been murdered.
Who exactly is this woman, and how did she get here? Investigators search the area for clues. But there's no trace of a murder weapon, nor are there any eyewitnesses to the crime.
They had to canvass the whole area, asking drivers if anybody had seen anything. But this was basically along a stretch of very busy highway.
One of those commuters is a man named Darren Curtis. At approximately 7:45 a.m., he drives by the crime scene, and like many, slows down to take a look.
On his way to work on I-540, Darren notices traffic is backed up. He passes the crime scene. He sees a body under a blue tarp. Just a half mile later, he spots a white car, strongly resembling his wife's, on the side of the road.
Darren's curiosity quickly turns to panic. The vehicle definitely belongs to his wife, Latrice. Frantic, Darren Curtis goes back to the crime scene he just passed. Detectives confirm Darren's worst fear. The deceased woman is indeed his wife, beautiful 21-year-old Latrice Curtis. Darren isn't the only one to feel the stinging loss. Latrice's father soon learns the devastating news.
I've got some really bad news. Latrice is dead.
All kind of things went through my head, man. I didn't know whether to be mad. I didn't know who to start blaming. Like, okay, this is a dream. Okay, we're gonna wake up in a minute and it's gonna be over with, man.
But it's not a dream. It's a nightmare. One that's just beginning to unfold. As police attempt to uncover the truth, they'll descend into a world of dark secrets and twisted fantasies.
They had this extramarital, possibly salacious, risque relationship.
It seemed that everyone in this case was keeping secrets, and I mean everyone.
Latrice Curtis grew up in a loving home full of big brothers.
Being the only girl, she got the special attention. She got to get away with things that the boys never got away with.
Blessed with good looks and an infectious smile, Latrice was one of the most popular girls in high school.
Latrice was always a people person. She could just walk up to you and just start a conversation. She was just adorable.
It was no surprise that Latrice had more than her fair share of male admirers, but this driven young woman always put her education first.
Latrice was just a good student. She just wanted to succeed.
That hard work paid off when Latrice was accepted into a local college in Raleigh. And it was during her very first semester that she met a dashing and ambitious accounting student named Darren Curtis.
Excuse me. Is it okay if I sit here? Sure.
They seem to mesh with each other pretty well.
What are you working on?
Something for my psychology class. Not a major.
What do you have for psych this year?
Dr. Brown.
I'm sorry.
Latrice and Darren instantly hit it off, and it wasn't long before the studious pair became an item.
It was definitely special. It was different in every way. She loved him.
Would you want to come with me? Grab a bite?
Soon after Darren and Latrice started dating, she introduced him to her family. Right away, they could tell there was something different about Darren. A former National Guard soldier, he was respectful, mature, and quickly won them over.
After I spoke with him, my perception of him actually changed. He was a really good kid.
Did you have fun tonight?
I did.
Good.
I enjoyed myself.
Latrice and Darren were so head over heels in love that just 1 year into their relationship, they decided they should spend the rest of their lives together.
Latrice, will you marry me?
Yes!
After saying I do, the couple moved into a cozy apartment, and Latrice transferred to prestigious North Carolina Central University in nearby Durham to finish her degree in business administration. But despite their long hours apart, Latrice seemed ecstatic about her and Darren's future together.
She was just starting out her life, her married life, her professional life. She was really just somebody that had her whole future ahead of her.
But on the morning of January 30th, 2008, just 9 short months after her wedding day, that future is severed in the most horrific way imaginable.
This is a senseless, shocking crime. I mean, who in the world would do something like this?
As police expand the search for Latrice's killer, what they don't know is that this search will lead them into a world of sex, lies, and hidden desires, where it seems everyone has something to hide. College students Darren and Latrice Curtis shared a love that knew no bounds. But just 9 months into their marriage, their lives were torn apart when police found Latrice brutally stabbed to death on the side of a North Carolina interstate. Surprisingly, one of the first people at the scene was her husband, Darren.
He actually drove out by the scene and saw his wife's car out there.
While first responders try and console Darren, investigators begin processing the bloody scene.
Latrice Curtis was brutally assaulted in this homicide. She was stabbed upwards of 40 times about her face, her neck, her chest, her torso. Her carotid artery was slashed open. Her jugular vein was slashed open. Her vocal cords were cut.
Man, she's got 20 or 30 stab wounds.
I mean, it didn't look like it's a robbery. She's got her earrings.
Although investigators still have no idea what prompted Latrice's violent death, one thing is certain.
Look at her hands.
Yeah, looks like she's been fighting.
She hadn't gone down without a fight.
It looks like there's been a struggle.
Hey, man, can you bag the hands? Yeah. Thank you.
The victim's fingernails were examined, and it was pretty clear that there was some injury or damage to her nails.
As CSIs bagged Latrice's hands, detectives head a half-mile down the interstate to the location of Latrice's abandoned vehicle. It's immediately apparent that a struggle has taken place inside.
The center console is broken, and it looks like blood is on the driver's side door.
But what is Latrice's car doing so far away from her body? An examination of the vehicle suggests someone other than Latrice drove her car last.
There was a DNA sample left on Latrice's car, on the steering wheel.
While CSIs send the DNA evidence they collected from both Latrice's car and her fingernails to the state crime lab for analysis, detectives ponder the killer's possible motive.
The question really is, who would want to hurt her, and who would want to kill her so violently and so brutally?
It's the same question Latrice's heartbroken family is asking.
Why? Why her? Why anybody? but definitely why her.
Is it possible Latrice had been the tragic victim of a random crime? To investigators, that theory seems unlikely.
When a person is murdered in a way like this, it looks so personal, so filled with hate.
You don't need to stab someone 40 times to kill them. So if you're stabbing someone 40 times, you are enraged, you are angry.
But just who could be that angry with a good girl like Latrice? With her family at a loss, police turn to the man closest to Latrice, her husband, Darren.
About what time did you see Latrice?
Darren explains that the last time he'd spoken to his wife was the previous evening around 10 p.m.
How did she seem to you? Was she upset or normal?
She seemed fine.
She calls her husband to say, I'm running late from school and I'm gonna get something to eat, so I'll be late getting home.
Around 11:30, Darren goes to sleep. He hasn't heard from his wife, Latrice, but figures she may have gone to eat at her family's home and perhaps just stayed there.
Darren says that when he woke up the next morning, he telephoned Latrice, but the call went straight to voicemail.
I'm just calling to check on you, making sure you're okay. If you would, just give me a call back whenever you get this. Bye.
Darren assumed Latrice might still be asleep, so he decided to shower and then left for work around 7:30 a.m.
On his way to work that morning on I-540, Darren notices traffic is backed up. He then passes a crime scene with yellow tape and a body under a blue tarp.
Darren says he felt a knot in his stomach as he passed the scene, and then just moments later spotted his wife's car.
So you just happened to be driving by, or what? Why'd you stop?
Man, I was on my way to work. I take the 540 every day.
While Darren's story sounds plausible, it seems awfully coincidental to detectives that he discovered his wife's car and arrived at the crime scene before police contacted him.
From the outside, everything looked fine between Darren and Latrice. But was there something about their marriage that no one knew about?
Detectives decide to take Darren down to the station for further questioning.
Darren, unbutton your sleeves, please. Let me see your hands and your arms.
Darren is questioned and photographed. They're looking for cuts and abrasions.
Unbutton your collar up there for me.
There are no outward signs Darren has been in any type of physical altercation. Still, investigators have a few hard questions they need to ask him.
Tell me about you and Latrice. Were you having any marital problems or anything?
No, we loved each other.
Do you mind if we check your house and your car?
You guys can do whatever you need to do.
With Darren's blessing, police search the apartment, but find no signs of a struggle in the couple's home or in Darren's car.
There's absolutely no physical evidence tying him to the crime scene.
Okay, Darren. You're gonna be free to leave, all right? But don't leave town.
Detectives released Darren that afternoon, but upon receiving Latrice's autopsy report, they make a shocking discovery.
When the autopsy was done on Latrice Curtis's body, there was a condom found.
This condom found inside her during the autopsy tells law enforcement that she may have had intercourse recently.
But judging by her injuries, it doesn't appear Latrice had been raped.
There were no injuries in her genital area consistent with sexual assault.
The discovery, however, raises more troubling questions. For starters, whose condom was it? And could sex have somehow sparked this vicious attack?
What is this number here?
With this case growing more salacious by the minute,
Does that look familiar?
investigators decide to subpoena Darren and Latrice's phone records.
It's Darren.
Pouring through the call log, Darren's story appears to check out.
So he called her at 10, and the next morning, just like he said he did.
But to their surprise, Latrice also made and received a flurry of calls from another number around midnight before she was murdered.
There's a bunch of calls from that number. It says it comes back to a Stephen Randolph.
Who is Stephen Randolph? The answer to that question would prove to be one of the keys to unlocking the mystery behind Latrice's death. Darren Curtis and his new wife Latrice hope to build a beautiful life together. But those dreams appear to have died on the side of a North Carolina freeway when Latrice was found brutally stabbed to death.
She was really a young woman that was just starting out her life. She had her whole life ahead of her.
Police have already questioned and released Darren. But phone records, along with a condom found inside Latrice's body, have cops wondering if the last person she had contact with, a man named Stephen Randolph, is somehow involved in this crime.
Law enforcement have questions for him. They're gonna wanna look really closely at Stephen Randolph.
While police begin searching for Stephen, investigators try and flesh out his connection to Latrice. Turns out, Stephen Randolph is one of the most eligible bachelors on NCCU's campus.
He was a very attractive young man. He was an athlete, he was a basketball player.
Randolph was trying to establish a career in the NBA as a professional basketball player.
So what's Stephen Randolph's connection to Latrice? While friends aren't 100% certain, they do tell investigators that Stephen and Latrice had definitely grown close in recent months.
They began socializing there and apparently some level getting interested in each other, perhaps flirting or something to that effect.
Were Stephen and Latrice more than just friends? The only person who can answer that question for certain is Stephen himself. Thankfully, it doesn't take police long to find him. 2 days after Latrice's body is discovered,
Excuse me, officer. Yes, sir.
Stephen walks into the Wake County Sheriff's Office.
Hey, my name is Stephen Randolph.
He walked through the front door of the sheriff's office like a gift.
I'm here to speak with a detective about the Latrice Curtis case.
But Stephen isn't alone.
CID, please.
Standing beside him is his roommate, a local pastor named Robert Reeves.
Stephen Randolph went to the police station with Robert Reeves in tow at Robert Reeves' insistence.
How's it going? How you doing? See you. Hey, Ray, how you doing? Can you take him to my office, please, and I'll get this one?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, sir, if you'll go right this way. Yes, sir, officer.
Leading Stephen into an interrogation room, detectives get right to work.
So tell me about Latrice and you. How'd you know her?
We had a few classes together. We met back in September. Just friends.
Just friends?
Stephen tells detectives that as their friendship deepened, Latrice would sometimes stop by his house to study.
Okay, so you were just in class together, nothing more than that?
That's it.
But when confronted with phone records, along with the findings of their autopsy report, Stephen begins to backpedal.
I'm gonna go ahead and be honest with you. We had a private relationship.
Latrice came to see Stephen on the night of the murder. It was only the second time she had been there. And they had an intimate encounter.
They were just friends. But that relationship evolved into a passionate sexual affair.
So you wore a condom?
Yes. Actually, the condom got trapped inside of her.
They tried it, they couldn't get it out.
Stephen says Latrice told him she'd have better luck removing the condom in the privacy of her own bathroom and left his house around 10 p.m. A few minutes later, Stephen followed suit.
Stephen drove off to clear his head. After driving around for a while, he ended up at his girlfriend's home, Velma Newton.
According to Stephen, shortly after he arrived at Velma Newton's home, Latrice started blowing up his cell phone.
Was just going crazy about it.
She's going home to her husband with another man's used condom inside of her body. And she's talking with Steve about the possibility of her becoming pregnant as a result.
So that's what all the phone calls were about?
Yeah.
It was about that?
Yeah.
So you're telling me you didn't kill her?
No.
Stephen is adamant he had nothing to do with Latrice's murder. But why hadn't he been more forthcoming about their sexual affair? And had he really visited his girlfriend, Velma Newton, after having sex with Latrice?
Hey, Reverend, how are you, sir?
Hey, how are you, detective?
I'm good.
Hoping to get to the bottom of things, police turned to Stephen's housemate, Robert Reeves. A 43-year-old pastor, Reeves is affectionately known as the Bishop in Durham's tight-knit evangelical community.
He was known as a very charismatic person. He worked as a motivational speaker.
Just got a few questions, if you don't mind. Can you tell me something about Stephen?
Actually, we met at a car wash.
Reeves tells police he met Stephen in late summer of 2007.
Stephen explains that he's fallen on hard times. He's out of money, needs a job, and perhaps a place to stay.
Seemed like a fine young man. I had the room at the time at my house.
Pastor Reeves offered to let Randolph live in a basement apartment in his house and only charged him about $300 a month for rent.
So according to Pastor Reeves, that fall, Stephen moved into the home Reeves shared with his sister. Still curious about the true nature of Stephen and Latrice's relationship, Detectives ask Reeves about the events of January 29th. He confirms that Latrice had indeed stopped by their house that evening.
She came by to visit Stephen, and I was actually on my way to a church service.
Pastor Reeves told police that on the night of the murder, he saw Latrice's car parked outside of his house.
Reeves says at 8:15 p.m. he left the house to attend a church service and returned home around 11:30.
When you got back, were there cars there?
No, Stephen and Latrice, both cars were gone. Both cars were gone.
Reeves tells detectives that though he didn't notice anything unusual that night, the following morning, Stephen confided in him about a phone conversation he had with Latrice around midnight, something Stephen hadn't mentioned to police.
During the phone call, Latrice tells Stephen she wants to take their relationship to another level.
He didn't appear to have made any promises to Latrice. It sounds like it may have been more like a roll in the hay. Latrice, it sounds like, was more interested in this long-term relationship.
Based on the new intel provided by Pastor Reeves, police can't help but wonder if Latrice was more serious about their relationship than Stephen. If so, could Stephen have viewed Latrice and her potential pregnancy as a stumbling block on his road to the NBA?
An unwanted pregnancy for a guy who's about to sign a multi-million-dollar contract, or at least if he believes he is, it could be motive for him to not want her around anymore. That is a question mark, a red flag for police.
But it isn't the only red flag police uncover when speaking to Pastor Reeves about Stephen.
Steve did have a knife and sword collection he kept at home.
But police had only just begun to tap the surface of this tawdry tale. Soon, a startling discovery would reveal 4 lives on a collision course. A collision that culminated in bloodshed. It's now been more than 48 hours since Latrice Curtis was found stabbed to death along Interstate 540 in Raleigh, North Carolina. While Latrice's killer has yet to be identified, revelations of a torrid affair, as well as the statement of Stephen's roommate, revered Pastor Robert Reeves, have police wondering if Latrice's extramarital lover, college hoop star Stephen Randolph, has committed the crime.
Randolph and Latrice was having sex, and it appears that the condom got stuck inside of her. There might be a potential that she's pregnant, and with his desire to be an NBA player, that could be a motive to want to get rid of her.
A motive that seems to dovetail nicely with another startling revelation, that Stephen owns a collection of knives and swords.
We know that this victim was stabbed repeatedly with a knife.
Could one of these weapons have been used in the attack? Police decide to execute a search warrant of Randolph's home and car. But after hours of combing the 2 locations, they find no signs of either a struggle or a potential murder weapon. With their search yielding no evidence, detectives attempt to verify Stephen's alibi. To do so, they reach out to his girlfriend, Velma Newton.
Tell me about that night. Did Stephen come over?
Yeah, he came over to my apartment around 10 o'clock.
According to Velma, Stephen shows up at her house at about 10 o'clock and leaves about 1 o'clock in the morning. This is consistent with what Stephen says about what time he left.
But with the coroner's office placing Latrice's time of death somewhere between 1 and 2 a.m., Stephen's alibi isn't exactly airtight.
Velma Newton was asked specifically whether or not there was any unusual behavior on behalf of Stephen that night, the night that Latrice was murdered.
Do you think Stephen may have had something to do with this?
No, there's no way. I mean, he's such a great guy. There's no way he could have done something like this.
Did you have something to do with it?
No.
Is it possible Velma is trying to protect Stephen? Or worse, could she potentially be involved?
No.
But Velma's adamant they're both innocent of the crime. In fact, she believes whoever murdered Latrice Curtis might have been targeting her as well.
She received these very strange, anonymous, threatening phone calls.
They were calling, trying to break us up, pretty much. And they would call over and over and over again.
And the anonymous threats weren't just directed towards Velma.
There were many threatening phone calls to Stephen.
He is warned to stop doing what he's doing, or he's going to get hurt, perhaps jeopardizing his dreams of the NBA.
According to Velma, it wasn't long before the threats began to escalate.
One night after leaving Velma's apartment, Stephen goes to his car and discovers all 4 tires had been slashed.
For detectives, it's a stunning turn of events, which suggests someone didn't exactly approve of Stephen Randolph's sexual escapades.
Is this a coincidence? I mean, does this have anything to do with what happened to Latrice? Can these things be related?
CID.
But before detectives can make sense of the slashed tires and menacing phone calls,
Yes, Trooper.
they get a call from State Trooper Isaac Cooper.
The 29th. What time was it?
Cooper recounts a routine traffic incident he investigated along Interstate 540 on January 30th, around 1:30 a.m., just 6 hours before commuters discovered Latrice's body.
I was driving around checking for disabled vehicles. This vehicle was on the shoulder of 540 eastbound. It had its hazards lights on, so I stopped behind it to see if they were okay.
But when Cooper approached the vehicle, he found it empty. At that point, Cooper called in the vehicle's license plate. While waiting to hear back from dispatch, he scanned the area and spotted another vehicle on the opposite side of the freeway.
There was a white vehicle on the westbound side with its hazards lights on also.
Detectives instantly realized that Cooper's description of this second vehicle is a match for Latrice Curtis's car. Cooper explains that before he got a chance to run the second car's plates, dispatchers requested he respond to another incident. But before Cooper pulled away, he got an update on the first vehicle.
They ran the tag. They responded to me that the vehicle was not stolen, and it came back to Robert Reeves out of Durham, North Carolina.
That's Robert Reeves, as in Pastor Robert Reeves, beloved minister, friend, and roommate of prime suspect Stephen Randolph. But what's the pastor's car doing on the same road where Latrice Curtis's body was found? The answer to that question would not only divide a community, but force police to consider a motive much more twisted than they had previously imagined. Detectives in Wake County, North Carolina, are trying to solve the gruesome murder of 21-year-old college student Latrice Curtis.
Chest. This murder was brutal. This woman was stabbed in her face, her throat, her chest. It was a bloodbath.
In the wake of her death, detectives have discovered that the newly married Latrice had become embroiled in a steamy affair with fellow student Stephen Randolph.
Because Randolph had this extramarital relationship with Latrice and she ends up dead, law enforcement are gonna have questions for him.
Randolph's alibi isn't exactly airtight, zero in on the couple, nor is that of his other girlfriend, Velma Newton. But before investigators can zero in on the couple, the case takes another mysterious turn, one that involves Stephen Randolph's roommate, Pastor Robert Reeves.
There was a trooper driving by that area that night, and he saw Robert Reeves' car
then
on the
abandoned
side
the
of
vehicle by the side of the road. Had Stephen Randolph used the pastor's car to stalk and kill Latrice Curtis, then abandon the vehicle by the side of the road? Or was Pastor Reeves somehow involved in Latrice's death?
Have your seat, please.
Detectives have no choice but to bring Robert Reeves back in for another round of questioning.
Robert Reeves
Let's
said
take
that
it
he
from the
was in
top one more
church.
time, okay? Yes. So tell me again what you did that night.
Robert Reeves said that he was at church earlier in the evening and that he came home and that he stayed home and that he did not drive his car anywhere and that he was not on the side of I-540 that night.
But the pastor also acknowledges it's possible Stephen Randolph borrowed his car.
He had his own set of keys, so he could use it when he needed to use it, and the bishop had let him do that.
Hoping to verify the pastor's story, police reach out to his other roommate, his sister, Willa Mae Thorpe.
According to Reeves, he's at church, the same church that his sister says she was attending the very same night. But she says she never saw him there. Is he trying to protect young?
Why is Pastor Reeves lying about his alibi? Is he trying to protect young Stephen Randolph? Or could he be involved in the murder of Latrice Curtis?
Abrasions
Pastor,
on his hands and arms.
Rolling up your sleeves for us?
As detectives questioned Reeves, they noticed he had some abrasions on his hands and arms.
You want to explain how you got those scratches? They look pretty deep.
Stephen and I were moving a nice desk. I was going backwards, fell, scraped up this arm a little bit. Oh, sorry.
Reeves did agree to give a DNA sample.
Open your mouth for me.
Investigators send Pastor Reeves' DNA sample off to the lab.
We're done.
And wait for the results. In the meantime, they bring Stephen Randolph back in for a second interview.
Did you borrow Robert's car?
Yes, I borrowed his car before, but not recently.
No recollection of the pastor being injured while borrowing Pastor Reeves' car the night of the murder. He claims to have no recollection of the pastor being injured while moving a desk.
Did he get hurt moving it?
Oh, no.
Injured in any way?
It was simple.
So there was no accident?
No.
But Stephen's not done. He informs detectives that recently the pastor seemed a little nosy, especially when it came to Stephen and Latrice's steamy romance.
He came in my room once after she left, and he was acting kind of weird, real strange.
After Latrice had left, Reeves comes down and enters Stephen's room. Reeves asked Stephen if he had relations with the woman who just left. Stephen said yes, he did.
According to Stephen, that's when Pastor Reeves asked a truly unusual question.
He asked Randolph if he had ever considered being a male escort, started asking him questions about the size of his penis, started asking him if he'd ever had oral sex done by a man, trying to persuade him that there's really no difference.
Ultimately, one of the things that he offered not charge Stephen Randolph was he said, if you will give me oral sex, I will not charge you rent.
Stephen says he rebuffed Reeves' sexual advances, and the pastor quickly apologized. But according to Stephen, it was shortly after this bizarre encounter that he and girlfriend Velma began receiving anonymous threats and found their tires slashed. For police, it's a startling accusation. But could it possibly be true?
Discovered that Reeves
to
had
answer
made
that question,
block
police subpoena Pastor Reeves' cell phone records.
They discovered that Reeves had made several blocked calls to Stephen, blocked calls to Stephen's girlfriend. So in all likelihood, it was Pastor Reeves who was making those threatening anonymous phone calls.
It became clear to investigators that Robert Reeves was jealous of anyone who was with Stephen Randolph because he was infatuated with Stephen Randolph.
Turns out, Reeves has also been hiding a long history of strange sexual behavior.
He had in the past sexually assaulted at least 2 other men or young boys.
He had this different life. He compartmentalized these 2 parts of his life. There was the pastor, and then there was, for lack of a better term, the sexual predator.
But just because Reeves harbored a secret and deep infatuation for his roommate doesn't necessarily mean he killed Latrice. Or does it? The DNA tests conducted on the pastor, as well as Latrice Curtis and her vehicle, provide some shocking new evidence.
Why is his DNA? Part of that DNA is Latrice's, but there's another mixture in there, and that belongs to Reeves. Why is his DNA inside of her car?
To investigators, the answer to that question is becoming increasingly apparent.
The belief is that Robert Reeves followed Latrice Curtis from his home that night to the highway where he killed her.
On February 2nd, 2008, police formally charged Pastor Robert Reeves with the murder of Latrice Curtis. The news leaves friends, family, and Durham's religious community stunned.
I was really angry, you know? I know that the back of the guy close to him that, I don't know what would happen, man. I don't know.
There was a complete and utter disbelief from the religious community.
Prosecutors believe they have the right man.
They absolutely had to have the wrong guy.
But prosecutors believe they have the right man. And on September 29, 2009, Robert Reeves is led into a Raleigh courtroom to stand trial for the murder of Latrice Curtis. In their opening arguments, prosecutors paint a chilling picture of a man who'd grown increasingly obsessed with Stephen Randolph. That obsession, they believe, gave way to rage on the night of January 29, 2008.
Stephen had rebuffed his advance. He was jealous because he was obsessed with Stephen, and Stephen had rebuffed his advances.
Prosecutors assert that after Latrice parted ways with Stephen Randolph the night of the murder, Robert Reeves followed her along Interstate 540, somehow convinced her to pull over, then savagely attacked her.
Reeves killed Latrice to get her out of the way because Latrice was having sex with Randolph. And for some sick reason, he thought that if he got her out the way, then maybe Randolph might give Reeves a chance.
But as the defense points out, if jealousy was indeed their client's motive, why on earth would Pastor Reeves pick a busy interstate as the place to put this plan in motion?
Latrice Curtis, one of the great mysteries of this case was how did Robert Reeves get Latrice Curtis to pull over to the side of the road? But she clearly did pull over, and then this encounter happened.
To bolster their case, prosecutors point to the slew of evidence connecting Reeves to the crime. The DNA, the state trooper report, and the bizarre anonymous phone threats. Next, prosecutors call Stephen Randolph to the stand to testify. In lurid detail, he recounts the night when Pastor Reeves propositioned him.
There were several pastors from other churches that came to support him. Well, when all the facts started to come out, the pastors weren't sitting in the audience anymore.
But with Stephen Randolph on the stand, defense attorneys see an opportunity. They assert that the person with the most to gain from Latrice's death wasn't Reeves, but her lover and NBA hopeful, Stephen Randolph.
It might be that Steve felt threatened and trapped, possibly trapped by her, and felt that he needed to do something.
The defense also has an explanation for how Pastor Reeves' vehicle ended up at the crime scene around the time Latrice was murdered.
The defense made it clear that there was a possibility that Stephen Randolph could have been driving that car.
It's a compelling argument, but defense attorneys aren't done. They have one more bombshell to drop on the jury. A piece of evidence so startling that some in the courtroom can't help but wonder if the wrong man is standing trial for Latrice Curtis's murder. In a Wake County courtroom, Robert Reeves is on trial for the murder of beautiful college student Latrice Curtis. Prosecutors have alleged the motive behind this crime is the once respected pastor's sexual obsession with Latrice's paramour, Stephen Randolph.
Prosecution's case was Robert Reeves killed Latrice Curtis to keep her away from Steve that he was infatuated with.
But defense attorneys have argued that the man with the most to gain from Latrice's death was Stephen Randolph himself.
The defense argued at trial that it was really Stephen who wanted Latrice dead.
But what about the DNA evidence found in Latrice's car? Defense attorneys argue there's a logical explanation.
The defense at trial attempted to argue that maybe somehow this was some form of transfer DNA.
DNA doesn't stay in one place, it can move. So if she's in that home, she's gonna be exposed to all kinds of DNA, particularly on her hands. If she had put her hand on the doorknob, she could pick up the DNA.
DNA wasn't the only genetic material. And as defense attorneys are quick to point out, Reeves' DNA wasn't the only genetic material found at the crime scene.
There was DNA found under Latrice Curtis's fingernails. And that DNA did not belong to Robert Reeves. It belonged to Stephen Randolph.
That really kind of threw me for a loop.
But prosecutors tell the court there's a viable reason Stephen's DNA was found at the scene.
She was having sex earlier that night with Stephen Randolph. Prosecution argued that that DNA got under her fingernails when she was having sex earlier that night with Stephen Randolph.
As for the defense's transfer DNA theory, prosecutors argue there's simply too much of Robert Reeves' genetic material found at the scene for anyone but the pastor to have committed the crime.
While transfer DNA is possible, it is extremely implausible in this case in light of all the other testimony and evidence, like the fact that Reeves had all of these cuts and scratches on his arms, like the fact that Pastor Reeves claimed to be at church when his sister said he wasn't.
On October 7, 2009, the jury retires to deliberate Robert Reeves' fate. 2 days later, they return with the verdict. Guilty.
Sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Defendant Robert Lee Adams Reeves was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole.
When they found him guilty, this guy's still living, you know, okay, we found the right man. Then another side of this guy's still living.
Mix of sadness and relief.
My sister's at a cemetery right now.
While the verdict is met with a mix of sadness and relief, the pain wrought by Reeves' twisted actions still lingers today, especially for Latrice's husband, Darren Curtis.
Darren was just a different person after that. To deal with this situation, that's a hard thing for anybody. I know to this day, just kind of changed him in a way where he very cautious of what he does.
In my opinion, Reeves definitely had some mental issues. He obviously fantasized about being with Randolph, but for him to take it that far of murdering somebody, thinking that he can move them out the way and have an opportunity is sordid, it's sick.
That always breaks the heart the most, and that is greed. When money is involved, the ties that bind a family together can snap in a single instant, and blood becomes just another currency to be traded. Welcome to LaGrange, Georgia, in February of 1991. This is a picturesque, tight-knit community. Nothing like the hustle and bustle of its neighbor Atlanta. It is the kind of town where everybody knows your name, your business, and your family history. Margaret Abernathy was 66 years old, and she was the undisputed matriarch of this town. She and her late husband built a local empire from a successful car dealership, investing in real estate and farms. But Margaret was not just a wealthy businesswoman. She was a kind soul. She was the type of woman who left buckets of fresh vegetables at the dealership for anyone who needed them. She loved her children so deeply and blindly that she would do anything to see their dreams come true. That love, that pure, unconditional motherly love, became her death warrant. I tell you, it makes you sick to your stomach. Margaret had 3 children, but it was her middle child, a 41-year-old woman named Priscilla Matula, who was groomed to take over the family legacy. Priscilla was the apple of her mother, his eye, an inseparable companion. When Priscilla wanted to buy a dealership with her new husband, Nick, Margaret did not hesitate. She fronted $130,000, putting up her own house and a certificate of deposit as collateral to give her daughter the world. But Priscilla was not a brilliant businesswoman. She was a fraud, and her kingdom was built on sand. On Monday, February 4th, at around 12:30 in the afternoon, a 911 call comes in. It is Priscilla. She is frantic, playing the part of the hysterical daughter to absolute perfection, claiming she walked into her mother's house and found her hurt after a burglary. Emergency medical technicians rush to the scene. They find Margaret on the bathroom floor, making agonal snoring sounds. Clinging to life by a thread, they rush her to the hospital, and the emergency room doctors discover the horrific truth. This was no fall, and this was no random beating. She had been shot twice in the head with a small caliber weapon. The brain stem was severed. They put her on life support, but she was gone. The family had to unhook her and watch the woman who gave them everything slip away. You look at a woman who spent her entire life giving to others, dying in a cold hospital room because someone decided her bank accounts were more valuable than her heartbeat. It is a tragedy of the highest order. So my team and I arrive at the house, which is now an active crime scene. The family insists it was a home invasion. Well, my. You have to be kidding me. A crime scene will always speak to you if you just shut up and listen to it. We look at the back door where the intruder supposedly forced entry. There is a broken glass pane, but the glass is on the outside of the door, meaning someone stood inside the house and broke it outward. Furthermore, the hole is so small you could not even fit a hand through it to reach the lock. We go to the bedroom. Drawers are pulled open, but the contents are taken out and set neatly on the floor. Let me educate you on something. Real burglars do not tidy up. They do not care about your floors. They destroy, they ransack, and they take whatever they can carry. Here, expensive televisions and electronics are completely ignored, sitting in plain sight, while a specific mink coat, some jewelry, and a small Derringer pistol are missing. The scene was staged. It was a poorly written play directed by an absolute amateur trying to manipulate the police. When you have a stage scene, you look at the inner circle. The family points fingers at Diaka, a gentle giant who lived with Margaret to care for her late husband. We find him, and he is crying his eyes out, broken by the loss of a woman he viewed as a grandmother. We check his alibi. He was secretly interviewing for a job at another car lot that morning. He is clear. Then the son-in-law, Nick, tries to throw shade on Margaret, his son, Alec, claiming Alec had financial troubles and was waiting on a $40,000 inheritance. But Alec was at work surrounded by witnesses. His alibi is airtight. When you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how sinister, must be the truth. We turn our eyes to the grieving daughter, Priscilla. 2 days after the murder, a bank manager calls us, and this is a turning point that blows the case wide open. The Saturday before she died, Margaret walked into the bank. She was physically agitated, emotionally distraught, almost inconsolable, her blood pressure through the roof. A mother had just realized her beloved daughter was robbing her blind. State financial experts later confirmed that Priscilla was running a massive check-kiting scheme, bouncing bad checks worth $20,000 to $30,000 between banks to create a phantom cash flow for a failing dealership. Margaret found out. She demanded the bank remove Priscilla from all business accounts instantly. The bank told her they did not have the personnel to do it on a Saturday. Margaret swore she would be there first thing Monday morning to cut her daughter off forever. She never made it. This is where the psychology of a killer strips away every mask of human decency. Priscilla knew Monday was the end. She would lose the dealership, the money, the status, and face absolute financial ruin. She had all weekend to look in the mirror and decide what she was. She could be a failed businesswoman facing the music, or she could be a killer protecting her lies. She chose murder. On Monday morning, Priscilla tried to establish an alibi, claiming she went to work between 8 and 8:15, drove to the post office, saw a long line, and drove around aimlessly. But people in a small town have eyes. A convenience store clerk saw her early that morning, proving she lied about her timeline. Even more damning, a woman looking at a rental house right across the street from Margaret is home saw Priscilla's vehicle parked there between 10 and 10:30 in the morning. That woman heard a gunshot. The autopsy tells a story of pure, unadulterated evil. There was blood in Margaret's bed, meaning Priscilla snuck into the house early and shot her own mother while she slept. But the first small caliber bullet did not penetrate the skull. Priscilla left, thinking the deed was done. She went to the office, played the concerned daughter, asking her co-workers if anyone had heard from Mom. Then, around lunch, she refused an offer from a co-worker to accompany her and drove back to the house to check on her morbid handiwork. And what does she find? Margaret is not dead. The poor woman has dragged herself out of bed and into the bathroom. There are bloody tissues everywhere, showing Margaret was confused, terrified, and desperately trying to clean her wounds. And what does the loving daughter do? Does she call an ambulance? Does she fall to her knees, weeping, begging her mother for forgiveness? No, she raises that gun and fires a second shot directly into her mother's brain stem to finish the job. I have hunted killers my entire adult life, and that level of cold-blooded calculation, executing the woman who gave you life just to cover up your own pathetic financial failures. It completely defies comprehension. We arrest her during the interrogation. She sits there like a statue. When asked about her mother's murder, she does not even acknowledge the question, displaying a chilling lack of emotion. But when asked about the finances, Oh, she suddenly has plenty to say, arrogantly claiming she had the authority to write those bad checks. Even while out on bond, she makes desperate, cagey phone calls to the convenience store clerk, trying to pressure the witness into changing her memory of seeing her that morning. It is pathetic. In August of 1992, a jury of her peers saw right through the staged burglary, the phantom post office lines, and the financial ruin she tried to wash away in her own mother's blood. They found her guilty and gave her a life sentence. It was a circumstantial case, and we never found the murder weapon. But you do not need the gun when the echoes of a killer is lies are that deafening. A family was completely destroyed. The Sunday dinners, the vacations, the legacy of a wonderful, generous woman, all erased by greed. Finding out that your own blood committed such an unspeakable act is a dark place for a family to navigate. Margaret Abernathy deserved the entire world for how she loved her family. Instead, she got a daughter who looked at her and saw nothing but a dollar sign. Justice was served, but I tell you, it can never bring back the soul of family that died on that bathroom floor. Humans are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine, but sometimes they kill because the weight of their own existence simply becomes too heavy to bear. I will tell you this. Murder is rarely a sudden thunderbolt. It is usually a slow-building storm. The storm in this case finally broke in May of 2005 in St. Petersburg, Florida, a sunny paradise where retirees go to live out their golden years. A cleaning crew was hired to empty a foreclosed mobile home on Yellow Pine Drive, a residence that had been abandoned for months. When they opened the door, they were greeted by a smell that no amount of time can erase from human memory. It is a distinct heavy odor of rotting flesh. Now, whoever left the surprise behind thought they were a genius. The trailer was littered with car air fresheners, boxes of baking soda, and bowls of potpourri hanging from closets and sitting on counters, mocking the very concept of oxygen. You have to be kidding me. You cannot cover up the smell of death with pine scent and cheap perfume. It simply does not work. The crew found a mattress in the back bedroom piled high with blankets. When they tried to lift the sheets of fabric tore with a sound like ripping hook and loop fasteners, revealing a human leg and foot wrapped in plastic. They called 911. The body was badly decomposed, essentially mummified. But the medical examiner found something that cut through the mystery of natural death like a hot knife. A single bullet hole in the center of the forehead. No exigun, a .38 caliber slug trapped inside the skull. This was no accident. This was an execution. There was no forced entry, no ransacking, which tells me the victim was comfortable with their killer. We had to know who was lying on that bed. Tax records showed the trailer belonged to two sisters, Barbara and Deborah Burns. Neighbors said the younger sister Deborah walked with severe limp and only had 3 teeth. The autopsy confirmed the twisted spine and the dental anomaly. We had our victim, 40-year-old Deborah Burns. Now the million-dollar question, where was Barbara? A check of Deborah's bank records revealed that someone was still making withdrawals of her $651 monthly Social Security disability checks from an automated teller machine in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Video surveillance showed the older sister Barbara cashing those checks. Well, my. Your sister is rotting in a foreclosed trailer surrounded by air fresheners, and you are cashing her. Government checks in another time zone. Detectives traveled to Virginia Beach and found Barbara working at a local convenience store. When they brought her in for questioning, she played the innocent fool. She sat in that interrogation room and claimed she had no siblings, that she did not even know a Deborah Burns. I tell you, criminals always think they are smarter than the police. But when detectives confronted her with the truth, that they found Deborah dead, the dam broke. She cried and said she just could not take it anymore. The story that spilled out was a masterclass in human tragedy. Barbara had been Deborah's sole caretaker since she was 15 years old. Deborah had suffered brain damage from scarlet fever as a toddler and never matured past the age of 6. For nearly 40 years, Barbara had no life, no friends, no future. She just worked minimum wage jobs and took care of a sister who was demanding, physically abusive, and relentlessly ungrateful. Then a miracle happened, or so they thought. A brother passed away and left them $350,000. They bought the trailer, traveled, and blew the entire fortune in 3 years on junk, including endless toys for Deborah and gifts for online romance scammers. When the money vanished, the reality set in. On Deborah's 40th birthday, they got into a massive fight over finances. Deborah went to sleep and Barbara lay awake listening to her snore, knowing the nightmare would start all over again the next morning. So Barbara walked to the dresser, took out a .38 caliber revolver she bought for protection, walked up to her sleeping sister, and put a bullet in her brain. She unloaded the remaining rounds, hid the gun in a drawer, wrapped the body in plastic, and scattered air fresheners everywhere. She lived in that trailer with her sister's decaying corpse for 6 weeks before boarding a bus to Virginia. You can have all the sympathy in the world for a woman who gave up her entire youth to care for a disabled sibling. And I do feel for her immense burden, but you cannot play God. You do not get to execute a sleeping human being because you are tired. Barbara Burns took a plea deal for manslaughter, was handed a 15-year sentence, and served 12. Today she walks free, claiming she cannot remember pulling the trigger, wishing her sister was still alive. Memory is a convenient thing to lose when the truth is too ugly to look at in the mirror. Humans are fascinating and deeply flawed creatures. They will extinguish a life for the most absurd and trivial reasons you can possibly imagine. I tell you, in my years as a homicide detective, I have seen greed take many forms. But the cold-blooded murder of Fred Brown is a tragedy that defies all human logic. It was the morning of April 25, 1991, in the quiet town of High Point North, Carolina, when Major Tom Shepard received a call about a body found on the side of Highway 60. The victim was a 45-year-old man named Fred Brown, lying face down in a grassy ditch behind a station wagon with 2 gunshot wounds to his head and 1 to his back. There was a clear footprint on his back, a chilling detail indicating the shooter stood directly over him to finish the job. This was no random roadside robbery. This was a calculated, deeply personal execution. Fred was a genuinely good man, a United States Army veteran who bravely served his country during the Vietnam War before settling down to become an economics professor at a local community college. He was universally loved by his students and colleagues, known as a smart, steady, and reliable pillar of the community who would do anything to help a stranger. But his boundless goodness was completely lost on his wife of 20 years, Patricia Brown. Patricia had grown up poor in Oklahoma and clearly saw Fred as her permanent ticket out of a life of struggle. After enduring open-heart surgery in 1990, Patricia went down to Alabama to recover and developed a bizarre obsession, returning home to hoard exotic birds until she had 50 or 60 of them filling their house. Fred absolutely hated the birds and the crippling financial debt Patricia was creating with endless home renovations and hot tubs. But he stayed quiet to keep the peace. He was a dutiful husband, but Patricia looked at him and saw nothing more than an obstacle and a life insurance policy. When investigators arrived to break the news, they immediately noticed that Patricia displayed an absolute lack of emotional response, waving away any concerns and claiming their marriage was completely perfect. But a seasoned detective knows that still waters often hide the darkest secrets. Investigators soon learned from Fred's close friend and co-worker that Fred was living in sheer terror, openly admitting he fully expected Patricia to put a contract out on his life. You have to be kidding me. A man looks his friend in the eye, says his family would be better off with him dead, yet refuses to seek a divorce because his religious convictions will not allow it. My, loyalty is an incredibly noble trait, but it should never cost you your life. Despite the glaring red flags, detectives could not physically tie Patricia to the crime scene because she had a solid alibi teaching a real estate class 30 minutes away on the night of the murder, with no forensic leads. The case went cold for 3 agonizing years while Patricia collected a massive $250,000 life insurance payout, sold family land, and moved to Alabama to open a lucrative exotic pet business, comfortably living her dream built entirely on her husband's spilled blood. But criminals are inherently stupid, and their own monumental arrogance always catches up with them eventually. In July of 1994, authorities in Reading, Pennsylvania contacted High Point investigators with bombshell. A woman had found cryptic letters written by her father, Leroy Wetzel, bearing the dramatic instruction to open only upon his death. Overcome with curiosity, she opened the envelope to find a highly detailed, written confession to the brutal murder of Fred Brown. Leroy was the ex-husband of Patricia's younger sister, Sheila. He was a thoroughly bad man with a long criminal record, standing only 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighing 145 pounds, covered in tattoos and anger. When investigators sat down with him, he folded immediately and sang like a canary, detailing how Daphne had orchestrated the entire plot, demanding the deaths of the elderly couple to secure her payment, despite the defense's attempts to portray Chow as the sole greedy beneficiary of the $850,000 insurance payout. The jury saw through the deception. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and received the ultimate punishment of life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory were also held accountable for their roles in the tragedy. Though the journey to justice was long and filled with moments of deep sorrow, it ultimately served as a profound testament to the dedication of the Arlington police force. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu was honored not by the tragedy of their passing, but by the relentless pursuit of truth that brought their story to light. The community of Arlington moved forward, carrying with them the enduring lesson that love, honesty, and family unity are the only true protections against the darkness of greed. The morning sun of June 10th, 2012, had barely begun to cast its pale yellow light over the quiet streets of Arlington, Texas, when a heavy, suffocating silence settled over a modest apartment complex. It was 7:29 in the morning. Inside the local emergency dispatch center, the telephone rang with a sharp, persistent tone. On the other end of the line was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant whose voice trembled with a mixture of anxiety and desperate hope. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The dispatcher, trying to maintain a calm and professional demeanor, asked Chow for their names. Chow, struggling to find his words through his mounting panic, spelled out the name of his father-in-law, explaining that his name was Long, last name Wngyn, and that the man was currently in his 70s. As the call progressed, the desperation in Chow's voice became more pronounced. He explained to the dispatcher that his wife, his son, and he had gone to the apartment because they had been unable to reach the elderly couple. They had stood outside, peering through the windows, and saw that things inside were in complete disarray. Everything seemed to have fallen down. It looked as though a whirlwind had swept through the living space, leaving behind a trail of chaos. The dispatcher assured Chow that officers were being dispatched immediately to the location. When Officer Weller arrived at the scene, he immediately sensed that this was not a routine welfare check. It was far too early in the morning for such requests, and the sight of an entire family standing outside the apartment, frozen in fear, was highly unusual. The family members were too terrified to enter the residence themselves. They had noticed that one of the windows was wide open, a detail that heightened their fears that something terrible had happened. Officer Weller made his way to the front door and entered the apartment. The interior was in complete disarray, bearing all the classic hallmarks of a burglary. He called out to the residents, but his voice only echoed back to him through the silent rooms. There was no answer. He walked through the living room, checked the kitchen, and searched the bathroom, finding no one. Finally, he approached the bedroom. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty, and the officer felt a brief moment of relief, thinking that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk and that everything would turn out fine. However, as Officer Weller turned to leave the bedroom, his flashlight beam caught something unusual on the wall next to a very small closet. There were dark, distinct hand smudges on the surface. A sudden, instinctual dread washed over him. Every fiber of his being told him not to open that closet door, but his duty required him to check every corner of the residence. He reached out, gripped the handle, and pulled the door open. Inside the cramped closet, he found the bodies of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They were hog-tied with duct tape, and their heads and mouths were heavily wrapped in layers of the same gray adhesive tape. There was blood everywhere. In that split second, the officer knew they were dead. With 14 years of law enforcement experience, it was the most gruesome and brutal scene he had ever witnessed. The shock was so profound that he walked out of the bedroom into the living room, temporarily unable to speak or even use his radio to call for help. He simply stood in the middle of the room, trying to process the horror of what he had just seen, before finally gathering the strength to contact his supervisor and request a crime scene unit. When the seasoned homicide investigators arrived, they were equally stunned by the sheer brutality of the crime. Long and Hong had been beaten with some kind of blunt force object. The evidence of a struggle was scattered throughout the apartment. There were bloodstains near the front door, on the carpet, the couch, the table, and the walls. The furniture had been ransacked, and compact discs were thrown about, suggesting a robbery. Yet, the extreme level of violence seemed unnecessary for a simple theft. It felt deeply personal and incredibly cruel. Long Nguyen and Hong, who had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, seeking to build a better life for their 3 children and grandchildren. They were well-liked and respected members of the large Vietnamese community in Arlington. After arriving in Texas, they had established a commercial sewing business, employing their son-in-law, Chow, who spoke the best English and served as the public face of the company. For a time, their hard work paid off, and it even secured lucrative contracts with major corporations, including Disney. But by the year 2011, their good fortune had vanished. They lost their primary contracts, and the business began to fail. Desperate to save their livelihood, the family turned to traditional beliefs. In Vietnamese culture, spiritual advisors are sometimes sought during times of great crisis, such as impending bankruptcy or legal trouble, to help lift curses and bring back good luck. Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong, searched a local Vietnamese newspaper and found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, who operated out of Houston, some 250 miles away. Daphne advertised that she possessed the power to remove bad curses and bestow good fortune. Encouraged by Hong, Chow contacted Daphne and drove to Houston for a consultation. Daphne performed a spiritual ritual, and the family felt a renewed sense of hope, believing that their business would soon recover. However, a year later, that hope was replaced by the horrific tragedy in the bedroom closet. As the detectives investigated the crime scene, they discovered several unusual items that seemed designed to paint a specific picture. On the coffee table lay a plate of crushed prescription pills, and nearby was a marijuana cigarette. Most intriguing, however, was a light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle. To the investigators, this looked like a deliberate calling card left by one of the active Vietnamese gangs in the area, who were known for extortion. Yet, the experienced homicide detectives quickly grew skeptical. The scene felt too perfect, too staged. Most gang members did not commit such intimate and excessively violent murders simply for a robbery. They began to suspect that the gang evidence was a deliberate distraction designed to lead them away from the true perpetrator. The investigation took a significant turn when detectives received a call from an insurance company. It turned out that Long and Hong had a substantial life insurance policy worth at least $1 million, and one of the primary beneficiaries was none other than Chow Tran. On June 13, 2012, detectives interviewed Chow at the police station, questioning him about the business and the large policy. Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the continuity of the family business in the event of a tragedy. He and his family provided airtight alibis for the night of the murders, explaining they had been at a birthday party and had played cards until late in the evening. Police collected DNA and fingerprint samples from Chow and other family members, comparing them to the evidence found at the scene, including the marijuana cigarette. However, the results returned negative. The DNA profile did not match any family members, nor did it match any profiles in the federal database known as CODIS. For 2 years, the case remained cold, with no new leads and no progress. Then, in the year 2015, a breakthrough occurred. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for stealing a horse in Houston, which is a felony in the state of Texas. Because of this felony conviction, his DNA profile was entered into the CODIS database, to the surprise of the investigators. His DNA matched the profile recovered from the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene. In 2012, at the time of the murders, Willie had been only 16 years old, which was why his profile had not been in the system earlier. On October 17, 2015, police arrested Willie Guillory. Under questioning, the young man broke down and confessed. He admitted that he had been at the apartment, but he insisted that he had not acted alone. He claimed that his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had recruited him to help with a job in Arlington. According to Willie, Bobby had been given a key to the apartment by a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright. Willie detailed how they had staged the scene to look like a gang robbery, using the blue bandana, the beer bottle, and the crush pills. He explained that when the elderly couple returned home, he had rushed to stop Hong from escaping or screaming, while his uncle Bobby had brutally beaten Long with a blunt object. They then used duct tape to secure the victims, placed them in the bedroom closet, and fled back to Houston. Willie claimed the entire plot was orchestrated by Daphne Wright because the family owed her a massive spiritual debt. Armed with this confession, detectives located and arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory on December 16, 2015. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, also confessed to his involvement, weeping as he expressed his fear and desperation. He explained that he had been laid off and was struggling to survive when Daphne offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby revealed that Daphne operated as a spiritual loan shark. Chow and Hong had run up a massive debt with her, which had ballooned to between $250,000 and $280,000 on credit, despite her failure to improve their business. When Daphne demanded payment, the family could not produce the money. Knowing that Chow and his wife were the beneficiaries of the large life insurance policies, Daphne allegedly devised a plan to eliminate the elderly couple so that the debt could be settled with the insurance payout. Most shockingly, Bobby claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran. Detectives were stunned by the implication that Chow had betrayed his own family. They traveled to Houston and arrested Daphne Wright on August 31st, 2016. A search at her home revealed detailed ledgers showing that she charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for spiritual services, including the application and removal of curses. During the subsequent investigation, prosecutors offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full testimony against Daphne, Bobby, and Willie. Chow agreed to cooperate. He claimed that Daphne had used her alleged spiritual powers to control his mind and body, making him feel powerless. He even claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money and escape. Daphne's wrath, a claim that detectives found utterly absurd and highly manipulative. Chow admitted that he had left the apartment key under a doormat for Daphne to retrieve. In August 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright began. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a greedy, ruthless woman who would stop at nothing to collect her money. The defense argued that Chow was the true mastermind who had orchestrated the murders to pocket the $850,000 of insurance money himself, using his immunity to escape punishment. In September 2019, the jury reached its verdict. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory were also held accountable for their roles in the horrific crime. Yet, for the investigators who worked tirelessly on the case, the outcome remained bittersweet. The knowledge that Chow Tran walked free, shielded by his immunity agreement, was a lingering shadow over a dark and tragic chapter of betrayal, greed, and misplaced faith. The morning sun of Texas always carries a unique promise, rising over the vast horizon of Arlington like a warm, golden hand brushing away the cool shadows of the night. It was the 10th of June in the year 2012, a season when the summer heat was just beginning to stir the air with a gentle, lazy energy. In this vibrant city, where modern glass towers stand in harmony with leafy residential streets, a large and closely knit Vietnamese immigrant community had long since found a place to call home. Among them were families who had traveled across oceans, carrying nothing but their dreams, their heritage, and unyielding hope for a brighter future. At 7 hours and 29 minutes in the morning, the quiet of the early hours was gently broken. Chow Tran, a 38-year-old man who had worked tirelessly alongside his family, stood outside a quiet apartment complex. His heart was heavy with a subtle, persistent worry. His elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, had not answered their telephone calls, nor had they opened the door to their cozy home. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a simple case of heavy sleep or a morning walk. But to those who knew the sweet, orderly couple, this silence was an unspoken riddle. Long and Hong were people of immaculate routine, the kind of gentle souls who greeted the sunrise with freshly brewed tea and a quiet prayer for their children and grandchildren. Chow called emergency dispatchers, his voice trembling slightly with a mixture of respect for the authorities and deep-rooted anxiety. For his family, he explained that his father-in-law, a man in his 70s, and his mother-in-law had not been heard from. He spoke of how his wife and his teenage son had gone and knocked on the door, only to find the residents wrapped in an unusual, heavy silence. Even more concerning, a nearby window was slightly open, swinging gently in the warm morning breeze, a sight that felt entirely out of place for a couple so careful and precise. When the responding police officers arrived, the sun was casting long, soft shadows across the courtyard. Officer Weller, a dedicated public servant with 14 years of experience under his belt, stepped into the quiet apartment complex. To him, this did not look like a routine check. He saw the entire family gathered outside, their faces etched with profound, quiet concern. He could feel the deep bonds of love that held this family together, a love that made their current fear all the more palpable. Stepping through the threshold, the officers immediately noticed that the apartment was in a state of disarray. Papers were scattered, and the usual pristine order of the home had been disrupted. Officer Weller called out, his voice echoing softly in the empty rooms. He searched the kitchen, where the scent of jasmine tea still faintly lingered, and then the living room, but found no one. Finally, he turned his attention to the master bedroom. At first glance, it appeared empty, and a wave of relief washed over him, leading him to believe the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning stroll in the neighborhood park. However, as he turned to leave, his flashlight caught faint, dark smudges on the wall adjacent to a small, unassuming closet. A quiet instinct, developed over more than a decade of serving the community, told him to pause. With a gentle but firm hand, he opened the closet door. There, hidden away in the shadows, were Long and Hong. The scene was one of deep sorrow. The sweet, hard-working couple had been bound with duct tape, their lives cut short by a senseless act of violence. The officer felt a wave of shock wash over him. In his 14 years of duty, this was a moment that shook him to his core, not because of the darkness of the act, but because of the sheer innocence of the victims. He stepped back into the living room, took a deep breath to steady his voice, and called for his supervisors and the crime scene unit. When the veteran homicide investigators, including Detective Stewart, arrived at the scene, they found themselves deeply moved by the tragedy. Detective Stewart, who had dedicated 21 years of his life to seeking justice in homicide cases, looked upon the scene with a heavy heart. The physical evidence suggested a robbery, yet there was an unusual, almost theatrical quality to the disarray. A blue bandana was carefully wrapped around a beer bottle, and a plate of crushed prescription pills lay on the coffee table alongside a partially burned marijuana cigarette. It was almost as if someone had gone to great lengths to leave behind a trail of breadcrumbs, pointing toward local youth gangs. But veteran detectives know that real life is rarely so neatly packaged. While the initial clues pointed to gang activity, something about the scene felt artificial, almost staged to deflect attention. As the community came together to mourn, the true warmth of Long and Hong's lives began to shine through the darkness. Neighbors and friends gathered to share stories of a couple who had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, seeking nothing more than a peaceful life and a legacy of love for their 3 children. They had built a modest but successful commercial sewing business, pouring their hearts into every stitch. For a time, their business had flourished, even securing prestigious contracts with major entertainment companies. They were the very definition of the American dream, built on a foundation of mutual support, laughter, and tireless dedication. Yet, like many small businesses, they faced hardships when the global economy shifted. By the year 2011, they had lost their major contracts, and financial worry began to cloud their peaceful home in times of great distress. People often looked to the traditions of their homeland for comfort and hope. Long and Hong, deeply rooted in the ancient customs of their ancestors, believed in the power of spiritual harmony. They believed that a string of bad luck could be a result of an unseen spiritual imbalance, a curse that required the guidance of a spiritual advisor to lift. Looking through a local Vietnamese language newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law had found an advertisement for a spiritual healer based in Houston, some 250 miles away. The woman, named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a unique ability to remove negative energy, lift ancient curses, and bring abundant good fortune to those in need. Desperate to protect their family legacy and restore the sewing business to its former glory, they reached out to her. Daphne Wright was a woman of strong presence, running a busy practice from her home in Houston. She promised a family that she could turn their fortunes around through a series of elaborate rituals. For a family steeped in tradition, her promises were a beacon of hope. However, as the months passed, the business did not recover. Instead of advising them to find practical solutions, Daphne encouraged them to invest deeper into her spiritual services. What began as a simple consultation soon became a spiral of financial obligation. Over the course of a year, the family found themselves owing Daphne an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000, all run on a system of trust and spiritual credit. To secure this growing debt, Daphne learned that the family held substantial life insurance policies designed to protect the children and the sewing business in the event of an untimely tragedy. The policies were valued at $1 million, with Chow Tran named as a beneficiary. It was a detail that did not escape Daphne's sharp, calculating mind. The investigation into the tragic loss of Long and Hong seemed to stall for a long time. For more than 2 years, detectives worked tirelessly, testing the DNA from the marijuana cigarette and checking the fingerprints left at the scene, but no matches were found in the national databases. The case slowly turned cold, but the memory of the sweet, elderly couple kept the detectives motivated. They knew that justice, like a slow-moving river, would eventually find its path. The turning point came in the year 2015, through a highly unusual chain of events. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had been 16 years old at the time of the incident, was arrested in Houston for a felony involving the theft of a horse. Because he was now an adult with a felony charge, his DNA profile was entered into the national database for the first time. Within days, the system flagged a perfect match between Willie's DNA and the saliva found on the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington apartment. When detectives brought Willie in for questioning, the weight of his past actions became too heavy to bear. He broke down in tears, revealing that he'd been led astray by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 49-year-old man who was struggling financially and looking for a way out of his debts. Willie explained that his uncle had been approached by Daphne Wright, who offered them $10,000 to travel to Arlington and carry out a dark plan. According to Willie, Daphne had provided them with a key to the apartment, which she claimed had been left for her. The plan was to make the scene look like a gang-related robbery by leaving behind a blue bandana, crushed pills, and a marijuana cigarette. However, the physical evidence they left behind to deceive the police became the very key that unlocked the truth. In December of the year 2015, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and his nephew's confession, Bobby also confessed to his role, expressing deep remorse and fear. He confirmed that Daphne Wright was a mastermind who had directed the entire operation, driven by greed and a desire to collect on the family's outstanding spiritual debt through their life insurance policies. The revelation of this spiritual betrayal shocked the community, but it also brought a profound lesson about the importance of family, truth, and vigilance. The investigators discovered that Chow Tran had been caught in a complex web of fear and spiritual manipulation, believing that Daphne held absolute power over his family's destiny. In exchange for his full and honest testimony, prosecutors offered Chow immunity, recognizing that his cooperation was essential to holding the true architect of the crime accountable. In August of the year 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright began. The courtroom was filled with members of the community, seeking closure for the loss of two beloved elders. Chow took the stand, delivering a powerful and emotional testimony that described how greed and manipulation had turned a family's quest for hope into a tragedy. He portrayed Daphne as a controlling figure who used her influence to exploit their deepest vulnerabilities. The jury listened carefully to the evidence, weighing the tragedy against the resilience of a community that refused to let darkness win. In September of the year 2019, Daphne Wright was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced the consequences of their actions, bringing a long-awaited measure of peace to the family. Though the journey to justice was long and filled with challenges, it served as a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. The Vietnamese community of Arlington emerged stronger, bound together by a shared commitment to protect one another, honor the legacy of their elders, and cherish the simple, positive values of hard work, family love, and mutual respect. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Le lives on, not in the shadow of their loss, but in the bright, enduring warmth of the family they loved so dearly in the community that stood by them until the very end. The morning sun of June 10th, 2012, rose over the quiet neighborhood of Arlington, Texas, casting a warm, golden glow across the peaceful suburban streets. It was a community built on diverse cultures and shared dreams, where neighbors greeted each other warmly and families worked together to build bright futures. Among them was a close-knit family of Vietnamese immigrants who had made Arlington their home after embarking on a journey to find new opportunities in America. They had brought with them deep-rooted traditions, a strong work ethic, and a profound love for their heritage. Early that morning, a call was placed to the emergency dispatchers. A man named Chow Tran, a 38-year-old resident, requested a welfare check on his beloved elderly in-laws. His voice carried a tone of deep concern as he spoke to the operator, explaining that his father-in-law, a gentle man named Long Nguyen, who was 70-something years old, and his mother-in-law, Hong Le, were not answering their door. Chow explained that his teenage son had gone to knock, but the home remained completely silent. Nearby family members had begun to gather outside the apartment, noticing an open window and feeling an unsettling sense that something was out of place. When the responding officers, including Officer Weller, arrived at the scene, they observed the family waiting anxiously outside. It was uncommon to receive welfare checks so early in the day, and the sight of the family standing together on the sidewalk highlighted the urgency of the situation. Officer Weller entered the quiet apartment, calling out into the silence. He walked to the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, finding no one. Turning to leave the bedroom, his flashlight caught faint smudges near a small closet door. A professional instinct urged him to investigate. Opening the door, he discovered a tragic and heartbreaking scene. The elderly couple, who had brought so much joy to their family, were gone. The loss of Long and Hong shook the local community to its core. They were known as a sweet, generous, and hard-working couple who never wished harm upon anyone. Having immigrated to the United States in the year 2000, they had established a commercial sewing business to create a lasting legacy for their children and grandchildren, with the help of their son-in-law, Chow, who acted as the public face of the business due to his strong English skills. They had even secured major contracts with prominent organizations. However, as the economic landscape shifted, the business faced significant challenges, prompting the family to seek traditional ways to restore their good fortune and protect their livelihood. In their search for support, the family had turned to a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, who advertised her services in a Vietnamese newspaper published in Houston, located over 250 miles away. Believing that she could help them navigate their business difficulties, they sought her guidance. Over time, however, what began as a search for hope became a heavy financial burden, with accumulated debts reaching between $250,000 and $280,000. The investigation into the tragic passing of the beloved couple was led by experienced homicide detectives who were determined to bring truth and closure to the grieving family. Initially, carefully placed items at the scene, such as a colorful bandana and other stage elements, suggested the involvement of local youth groups. However, the seasoned investigators quickly felt these clues were almost too perfect, suspecting that the scene had been artificially arranged to mislead them. For more than 2 years, detectives followed every lead, interviewing over 50 to 60 neighbors and family members and collecting physical evidence. Yet, the case went quiet until the autumn of 2015, when a breakthrough occurred. A routine database match connected a piece of physical evidence from the scene to a young man named Willie Guillory, who had recently entered the adult system. When questioned by detectives, Willie, who had been 16 years old at the time of the event, revealed that he had been led into the situation by his uncle, Bobby Guillory. Bobby was subsequently located and brought in for questioning. He cooperated with the authorities, explaining that he had been facing extreme personal hardships and had been offered a sum of $10,000 by Daphne Wright to his sister. He further alleged that the plan had been orchestrated to claim substantial life insurance benefits to settle the outstanding spiritual debts. Throughout the legal proceedings that followed in the summer of 2019, the strength of the community and the dedication of the justice system remained steadfast. Daphne Wright was brought to trial, where the details of the situation were thoroughly examined by a jury of peers. The trial highlighted the importance of protecting vulnerable individuals and emphasized the enduring power of truth. Daphne was found guilty of capital murder and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, ensuring that those who sought to harm others were held fully accountable. The story of Long and Hong serves as an inspiring reminder of the value of family unity, The strength found in community heritage and the tireless dedication of those who work in public service to protect the innocent through the darkest moments, the light of justice prevailed, bringing peace to a quiet Texas town and reminding everyone of the sacred bond of family. The morning sun rose over Arlington, Texas, casting a warm, golden glow across the bustling streets of a community built on hope, hard work, and the shared pursuit of a beautiful future. In this vibrant corner of the state, many families had settled down to build their lives anew, bringing with them rich cultural traditions, a deep-seated love for family, and an unwavering belief in the promise of their new home. Among them were Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, a devoted elderly couple who had traveled from Vietnam to the United States in the year 2000. They brought with them not only their physical belongings, but also a treasure trove of heritage, ancient customs, and 3 children whom they loved more than life itself. To understand the journey of Long and Hong is to understand the strength of the human spirit. They belonged to a proud generation of immigrants, many of whom had arrived in the United States after the year 1975. Over the decades, through the 80s and 90s, Arlington had become a welcoming haven, a place where a close-knit Vietnamese community flourished. Long and Hong saw the city as the perfect soil in which to plant their family roots. They were known by everyone as sweet, generous, and incredibly hard-working individuals who never sought conflict and always extended a helping hand to those in need. With a shared vision of legacy and prosperity, they established a commercial sewing business. To ensure its success, they welcomed the assistance of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old man who spoke English fluently and possessed a natural talent for handling public relations. Chow became the face of the business, coordinated with contractors and negotiating agreements. For nearly a decade, the family poured their hearts into the enterprise. Their dedication paid off handsomely when they secured a highly lucrative contract with a globally recognized entertainment company famous for its beloved cartoon characters. It seemed that the American dream was fully within their grasp. However, as the cyclical nature of commerce would have it, challenges eventually arose. By the year 2011, the contract ended, and the sewing business began to experience a significant downturn. In times of difficulty, human beings often look to their deeply held beliefs for comfort, guidance, and a sense of control. Long and Hong, staying true to the ancient traditions of their homeland, believed that their string of unfortunate events might be tied to spiritual imbalances or unseen negative energies. In many Eastern traditions, when families face severe hardships such as financial distress or personal turmoil, they seek the counsel of a spiritual advisor to perform traditional rituals aimed at restoring harmony and inviting good fortune back into their lives. In search of such guidance, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law browsed a local Vietnamese newspaper. There, they found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located about 250 miles away. In the city of Houston, the advisor, a charismatic woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a unique ability to remove negative curses and bring abundance to those who sought her services. Encouraged by the prospect of saving the family business, Chow reached out to her, and soon they made the journey to Houston for a consultation. Daphne performed a traditional ritual, leaving the family filled with renewed hope and a positive outlook for the future. Regrettably, instead of finding the financial relief they desperately sought, the family became entangled in a complex web of spiritual debt. Chow continued to invest heavily in the rituals, and because the business did not immediately recover, the financial obligations to Daphne ballooned to a sum between $250,000 and $280,000. The pressure of this outstanding balance began to strain the family dynamics, creating an atmosphere of quiet desperation. On the morning of June 10, 2012, at 7:29 in the morning, Chow Tran contacted emergency services, requesting a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. He explained to the dispatcher that his family had gathered outside the apartment and felt deeply concerned because a window was open and there was no response from inside. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington police force with 14 years of experience, was quickly dispatched to the scene. Upon entering the residence, the officer observed that the apartment was in disarray, with signs suggesting a potential burglary. Guided by duty and a desire to ensure the safety of the residents, Officer Weller searched the rooms. While preparing to leave the bedroom, the officer noticed unusual hand smudges on the wall adjacent to a small closet. Following professional instinct, Weller opened the closet door and discovered the tragic scene. Long and Hong had passed away inside the closet, their lives brought to a sudden and quiet end. The loss of this beloved couple sent shockwaves through the community. Homicide investigators, including Detective Stewart, a veteran with 21 years of experience, immediately initiated a comprehensive investigation, while initial physical evidence, including a blue bandana and a hand-rolled cigarette left on the table, suggested a potential connection to local youth groups. Investigators remained meticulous, questioning whether the scene had been intentionally arranged to mislead them. The investigation proceeded with the utmost care and respect for family. Detective Stewart interviewed Chow Tran, who explained that the family had been celebrating his father-in-law's birthday the evening before the incident. The couple had been driven home by another relative around 10:30 in the evening, which was the last time they were seen alive. Chow also mentioned that the sewing business had carried a substantial life insurance policy to ensure its continuity in the event of a tragedy. To identify those responsible, forensic teams collected genetic material and fingerprints from the scene, comparing them against national databases. For over 2 years, despite interviewing more than 50 to 60 community members and neighbors, the case remained unresolved. However, the dedication of the Arlington Police Department never wavered. In the year 2015, a significant breakthrough occurred. A youth named Willie Guillory, who had been 16 years old at the time of the incident, was arrested in connection with an unrelated felony involving the unauthorized taking of a horse. Because he had reached adulthood and had been convicted of felony, his genetic profile was entered into the national database, resulting in an exact match with the genetic material found on the hand-rolled cigarette from the apartment. When questioned by investigators, Willie became emotional and provided a full account of the events. He explained that his uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 49-year-old man with no prior history of unlawful behavior, had asked for his assistance in Arlington on June 9, 2012. Willie stated that they had been provided with a key to the apartment to arrange the scene to look like an unauthorized entry. Willie further revealed that the entire plan had been set in motion by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor from Houston. According to Willie, Daphne had expressed frustration over unpaid debts and had suggested taking drastic measures to recover funds. With this critical information, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory on December 16, 2015. Bobby cooperated with the authorities, expressing deep remorse for his actions. He explained that he had been experiencing extreme financial hardship at the time and had been offered $10,000 by Daphne to participate. Bobby confirmed that Daphne was the driving force behind the plan, aiming to recover the outstanding balance through the family's insurance policies. On August 31, 2016, investigators traveled to Houston to interview Daphne Wright. During the search of her residence, authorities discovered business ledgers detailing substantial fees charged for her spiritual services, ranging from $10,000 to $40,000 per client. To build a strong legal case and ensure justice for Long and Hong, prosecutors offered Chow Tran immunity in exchange for his complete and truthful testimony regarding the financial arrangements and the events leading up to the tragedy. Chow agreed to cooperate, providing vital context during the legal proceedings. He described the immense psychological pressure the family felt regarding the spiritual debts and how they believed Daphne held influence over their well-being. The trial of Daphne Wright commenced on August 26, 2019. Chow Tran took the stand, delivering impactful testimony about the nature of their business relationship and the demands made for payment. The defense argued that Chow carried a share of responsibility in the financial arrangements, but the prosecution successfully demonstrated Daphne's role in organizing the events. In September of 2019, the jury reached a unanimous verdict, finding Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, bringing a sense of legal resolution to a long and complex journey. While the legal proceedings concluded, the memory of Long, Nguyen, and Hong, Liu remains a powerful testament to the values of family devotion, hard work, and the strength of the Arlington community. Their story serves as a gentle reminder of the importance of seeking positive, rational paths in times of difficulty, relying on the support of loved ones, and upholding the human values that bind us all together. Through justice, the memory of their lives is preserved, inspiring others to cherish their families and live with integrity and hope. The morning sun of early June always brought a particular kind of heavy warmth to Arlington, Texas, a city where wide concrete avenues stretched out under an endless blue sky, connecting people from all walks of life. In the quiet, suburban neighborhoods where trees cast long shadows over manicured lawns, there lived communities built on hope, perseverance, and the timeless pursuit of a better life. Among them was the vibrant Vietnamese community, a group of families who had crossed oceans, brought their traditions, and woven their stories into the fabric of the American dream. But on one particular Sunday morning, the quiet of the neighborhood was broken. The birds still sang in the pecan trees, and the soft hum of air conditioners buzzed in the background. Yet outside a modest apartment complex, a family stood in frozen anxiety. Chow Tran, a 38-year-old man who had long served as the bridges and the voice for his beloved family in this new land, held his telephone with a shaking hand. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Beside him, his wife and teenage son watched with wide, frightened eyes. The front window of his in-laws' apartment was slightly ajar, a sight so unusual for the meticulously neat elderly couple that it felt like an icy hand brushing against Chow's spine. Taking a deep breath, Chow spoke into the receiver, his voice trembling, but clear as he reached out to the emergency dispatchers. He requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, explaining that they had not answered the door and that something felt terribly wrong. The dispatcher on the other end of the line was calm, professional, and reassuring. She asked for the names of the individuals. Chow spelled out the names carefully, explaining that his father-in-law was named Long, spelling it letter by letter as L-O-N-G, and the last name Nguyen, spelling it as W-E-N-G-U-Y-E-N. He mentioned that his father-in-law was currently in his early 70s. As they waited, the minutes felt like hours. Chow's mind raced with memories of his father-in-law, Long Nguyen, and his mother-in-law, Hong Liu. They were gentle souls who had immigrated to the United States of America from Vietnam in the year 2000. They had brought with them not just their family, but their deep-seated traditions, their warmth, and an unwavering belief that hard work and kindness would build a beautiful legacy for their three children and grandchildren. When they first arrived in Texas, the transition had not been easy, but they had faced every obstacle with smiles and determination. Together, they started a commercial sewing business, pouring their savings and their physical labor into industrial sewing machines and rolls of fabric. Because Chow spoke the best English in the family, he naturally became the public face of the business, dealing with contractors and managing the daily operations, while the elderly couple worked tirelessly in the background, sewing garments with precision that only decades of dedication could bring. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore fruit, their sewing business flourished, and they eventually secured a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, producing items that would even carry the branding of Disney. They were a prominent, respected Asian family with deep ties to the community. They had realized their American dream, built on the solid foundation of family unity and mutual support. But as the years passed, the tides of fortune began to shift. By the year 2011, the contract with the commercial giant was lost, and the steady stream of orders began to dry up. The sewing machines grew quiet, and the heavy silence of financial worries settled over the household. The family did not know where to turn. In their culture, when practical means failed, it was natural to look to the spiritual world for guidance, protection, and a way to lift the heavy cloud of bad luck that seemed to hang over them. Through the pages of a local Vietnamese language newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located about 250 miles away in the bustling city of Houston. The woman advertised herself as a healer, someone who possessed a unique ability to lift ancient curses, bring good fortune, and restore prosperity to struggling businesses. Eager to protect their family and desperate to revive their dream, they reached out to her, hoping for a miracle. Now, standing outside the apartment on that bright June morning, Chow could only pray that his fears were unfounded. Within minutes, the sound of an approaching police cruiser signaled the arrival of Officer Weller, a seasoned responding officer with 14 years of experience. As the officer pulled up to the scene, he immediately noticed that this was not a typical welfare check. Usually, such calls involved a single concerned relative, but here, an entire extended family stood together on the pavement, their faces pale with a shared, unspoken dread. Officer Weller walked up to the apartment door, his senses on high alert. He knocked firmly, calling out into quiet air, but no voice answered from within. He tried the handle, and finding the door unlocked, he stepped inside, his flashlight cutting through the dimness of the entryway. The interior of the apartment was in complete disarray, displaying all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled out, belongings were scattered across the floor, and the living room looked as though it had been thoroughly ransacked. Officer Weller moved carefully through the rooms, calling out to anyone who might be hiding or hurt. He checked the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, finding them all empty. He approached the main bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty, and the officer felt a brief moment of relief, thinking that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk to escape the summer heat. But as he turned to leave the bedroom, his flashlight caught something unusual on the wall next to a small closet. There were faint, dark hand smudges on the plaster, as if someone had reached out to steady themselves in a moment of struggle. A sudden, heavy instinct told the officer to hesitate. Every protective urge within him signaled caution, but his duty required him to be thorough. He reached out, grasped the handle of the small closet, and pulled the door open. The sight that met his eyes in that small space was one that would remain with him for the rest of his career. Inside the closet lay the silent forms of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had been bound tightly, hogtied with heavy silver duct tape, and their heads and mouths were covered in layers of the adhesive material. There was no breath left in them, and the violence of their final moments was evident in the space around them. In a state of profound shock, Officer Weller stepped back out of the bedroom and into the center of the living room, momentarily unable to speak or even use his police radio. He stood there, letting the cold reality of the scene sink in, before finally gathering his composure to request a supervisor in the crime scene investigation unit. Soon, the apartment was filled with detectives, including a homicide investigator who had spent 21 years investigating the city's most difficult cases. Even for him, this scene was exceptionally brutal. The level of violence used against a gentle, elderly couple who had no known enemies was baffling. Initial observation suggested that the victims had suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, possibly inflicted by a heavy object like a hammer. The living room showed signs of a chaotic struggle, with compact discs thrown about and furniture overturned. leading the detectives to initially theorize that they were looking at a residential robbery that had turned tragically violent. Yet, as the crime scene investigators meticulously processed the apartment, they began to discover clues that seemed almost too convenient. On the coffee table lay a plate with crushed prescription pills, arranged as if someone had intended to snort them, along with a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. More strikingly, a light blue bandana was found wrapped carefully around a beer bottle, left on display like a calling card. In Arlington, certain active youth gangs were known to use specific colors, and a light blue bandana was a recognized symbol among them. However, the experienced homicide detectives felt a lingering skepticism. While youth gangs were indeed active in the area and occasionally engaged in extortion, they rarely committed such highly organized, targeted, and extremely violent double homicides against elderly citizens in their own homes. The scene felt artificially constructed, as if someone had gone to great lengths to stage a robbery and point the blame toward local street gangs. The detectives decided to send the physical evidence, including the hair fibers, genetic material from the blood swabs, and the saliva from the marijuana cigarette, to the laboratory for urgent testing. They processed the duct tape for latent fingerprints, hoping to find a match in their databases. In the days immediately following the discovery, the detectives began interviewing the family members to understand the couple's lives and search for any potential conflicts. Chow Tran was the primary spokesperson, sitting down with Detective Stewart to provide a detailed timeline of the events. Chow explained that on the evening before the bodies were found, the entire family had gathered at his home to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. It had been a warm, happy occasion, filled with laughter, traditional food, and card games. Long and Hong had stayed until about 10:30 in the evening, enjoying the company of their grandchildren, before receiving a ride back to their apartment from another relative. That was the last time anyone in the family had seen them alive. When asked if the couple kept large sums of cash at home, Chow admitted that while some older immigrants preferred to keep their savings close rather than trusting modern banking institutions, his in-laws did not possess much wealth. The sewing business had been struggling significantly, and they had been living very modestly. A day later, the detectives attended the autopsy at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The medical examiner confirmed that while the victims had suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, the physical blows were not the direct cause of their deaths. Instead, the autopsy revealed a far more suffocating reality. Hong Lee's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape, and Long Nguyen's face had been wrapped in 10 feet of duct tape. They had ultimately suffocated under the weight of the binding. The sheer cruelty of the act convinced the investigators that this was not a simple robbery gone wrong. The primary intent of the perpetrators had been to ensure that the elderly couple did not survive. As the detectives returned to the station to compile their findings, they received an unexpected phone call from a life insurance representative. The representative explained that it was standard procedure to contact law enforcement when a claim was made on a policy of a substantial amount following a homicide. To the detective's surprise, they learned that there were life insurance policies on a deceased couple totaling at least $1 million. When investigators inquired about the named beneficiaries, they discovered that one of the primary recipients of the payout was Chow Tran himself. On June 13, 2012, detectives invited Chow back to the police department to clarify the details regarding the insurance policies. Chow was cooperative, explaining that because the commercial sewing business was registered under his in-laws' names, the family had established the policies to ensure that the business could survive and continue to support the children and grandchildren if either parent were to pass away. Chow and the rest of his family provided solid, consistent alibis for the night of the murders, showing that they had all been together at the birthday celebration and had remained home afterward. The detectives collected genetic samples and fingerprints from Chow and other relatives to compare against the evidence collected from the apartment. When the laboratory results returned, the findings brought both clarity and frustration. The genetic profile recovered from the marijuana cigarette left at the scene did not match Chow, any of the family members, or any individuals currently registered in the National Combined DNA Index System. Because the national database primarily contains genetic profiles of adult individuals who have been convicted of felony offenses, the lack of a match suggested two possibilities. Either the killer had no prior felony record, or the perpetrator was a minor whose genetic information had never been entered into the system. For more than 2 years, the investigation made no progress. The leads dried up, the neighborhood returned to its quiet routines, and the file was placed among the department's unresolved cold cases. The family went about their lives, the sewing business was permanently closed, and the memory of the gentle elderly couple lingered as a quiet shadow over the community. Then, in the autumn of 2015, a sudden and unusual event in another part of Texas breathed new life into the sleeping. Investigation. In Houston, a young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for an unusual felony offense, the theft of a horse. Because horse theft is classified as a felony in the state of Texas,